Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Quick video today because Sebastian Vettel has received a €25,000 fine for not complying with the FIA's regulations with the sportsman-like conduct they expect from their drivers, because he's been very frustrated indeed at what he believes is the lack of consistency in the stewarding so far this year, and other drivers certainly agree as well, but the FIA, they've taken their toll on the matter. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. Let's just dive straight on into this, right, because after the race finishes, after the sprint race finishes, there was people talking that Vettel had been summoned to the stewards regarding behaviour at the drivers' meeting, we believe on Friday. Now, Luke Smith right here says from Autosport, being told that things got pretty tense at the briefing. So, for whatever reason, the drivers were not particularly happy with what they see seemingly as inconsistency in the stewarding decisions. The race understands that Friday's driver briefing was the latest in a series of lengthy and animated discussions between the drivers and race direction. The relationship between drivers and officials has grown increasingly tense as this season has progressed, and this is kind of one of the key talking points, even, and obviously this was before the race, this incident, the sprint race, but it was very much a topic of discussion during the race itself, that some issues that are getting punished here in Austria, like very similar kind of incidences, were not getting punished at all back in Silverstone and earlier this year and last year, for example. There was lots of talk about the Albon Norris incident, right? Okay, Albon, fair play, he kind of pushes Norris off the track, gives him no room, but of course Norris goes over the sausage curb, and Albon actually gets a 5-second penalty for that, and 2 points added onto his kind of penalty point license thing that you guys can see right here. But last time out in Silverstone, there were many very similar issues where drivers in Albon's position were forcing the other driver off the track, and that was deemed perfectly fine, a racing situation. It was happening with, I mean, this is the one example, obviously, right here towards right at the end of the race. I believe this was the final lap when, of course, it was Mick Schumacher trying to make a move on Max Verstappen, and Verstappen just gave him absolutely no room at all here into Brooklands and into Luffield, of course, the next corner. But yeah, completely forces Mick off the track, gives him no room at all, and I would say, yeah, fair enough. This is maybe, to me, this is borderline of what is acceptable. I think some race directors would say, okay, it is acceptable. Some races directors would say it is not. But the thing is, they want consistency, right? If this is okay, then this should always be okay, regardless of the consequences. That's kind of what I think that is being the issue here, is that when Max forces Mick off the road, yes, he can still continue. Whereas in Albon's case, because he pushes Norris off the road and there's a sausage curb there, then he bounces over the sausage curb and therefore it looks worse, and therefore maybe they give him the penalty. Whereas in this case, it's fine, and we saw it wasn't just this incident. Obviously, there were many other ones. When Perez, for example, he pushed Hamilton kind of off the track as well, down into turn 3, and also just a few corners earlier when he had the same incident with Leclerc, and Perez cuts the chicane, forces Leclerc off the road, Hamilton goes through, through goes Hamilton. If you guys, well, I'm sure you guys have seen that one plenty of times already, but both of those instances were deemed to be perfectly fine by the FIA, whereas, of course, in this sprint race, we saw a very different story. So this is kind of one of the ideas where the drivers just want to know what is going on. What can we do? What can we not do? What's allowed? Like, look, if we can do that, then let us do it all the time. If we can't do that, give us a penalty all the time, but at least make it consistent, right? And that has been, I think, the key frustration for many of these drivers. And of course, it's not just Vettel that has raised this point. Like, apparently the discussion was about the inconsistency with regarding to the management, and that is some of the issue with, of course, look, they get rid of Massey last year. This year, they've got Niels Wittich. They've also got Eduardo Freitas. They've got two different race directors who both have slightly different ideas on what they think or how they should steward a race. And then, of course, sometimes it's Wittich, sometimes it's Freitas, depending on the weekends and their team of stewards, and things aren't always particularly consistent, right? So that's the thing. And even George Russell gets in on the act here and has a few words. I mean, this is kind of the key points that I wanted to mention. We're never going to solve this issue because at turn 4 here in Austria, you'll never have the issue because of the gravel, but compare that with turn 1 or Silverstone last week, so then you do have the issue, right? He says, look, we should stick with one race director. We need to have more consistency on the stewarding. We come to the following event and often the steward for the previous event is not there. There's no accountability or explanation of decisions. We ask questions. It's difficult to get a straightforward answer because I wouldn't say the blame, but the blame is put on someone who isn't there, right? So that's the thing. I imagine Vettel was kind of saying, okay, last weekend now, how come Verstappen could get away with pushing Mick off the track? How come Perez could get away with pushing Leclerc off the track and Hamilton off the track? And, obviously Vettel, I guess, wants answers for that, right? Can I do that, right? Is that what is allowed? But then, of course, the race director for this weekend is obviously not the same race director we had last weekend, and therefore, things are going to get pretty heated, I imagine, right? So even Russell says here at the end, I think we should just have one race director, because when you had one race director, things were consistent. A number of drivers have commented on the inconsistency, right? And I think it's not just something the drivers have seen, but certainly the fans watching as well. And Vettel, for apparently storming out of the meeting, left the drivers' meeting that was being held and expressing frustration at the meeting and leaving it without permission. He got, had handed a €25,000 suspended fine for his behaviour. Apparently he's gone to apologise to the race director without reservation and had a very constructive conversation covering the topics in the meeting and more. But I mean, yeah, still, what about that, right? Vettel kind of boiling over a bit here, and maybe understandably, based on what I think a lot of the drivers are feeling right now, and then the FIA are going to hand him a €25,000 fine for doing exactly that. So yes, we know that tensions already exist between the drivers and the FIA, between the teams and the FIA, and this is while doing nothing to help that relationship. Just to mention this before we close out the video, Vettel also getting investigated for, well, many drivers actually investigated for messages during the second formation lap. It seems like a lot of drivers were told that effectively the second formation lap was going on, and they got messages in their ears to tell them put the pit limiter on to limit the speed or whatever, and apparently that is being deemed as effectively outside assistance during that kind of period of the race, which the drivers are not allowed to have. Now, I believe the precedent for this is, last time this happened a few years ago for the Haas team, I'm pretty sure it was mentioned right here, as Chris Medland says, in Hungary 2020, both Haas drivers got a 10-second time penalty for receiving instructions to come into the pit to change tyres during the kind of formation lap radio messages, which aren't generally allowed. So these drivers are being investigated. If that is the case, they'll all get pushed back by 10 seconds. It may, of course, be a lesser time penalty depending on the situation, but I'm not really sure this is going to have too much impact in the order, certainly potentially for Riccardo. I believe, I'm not exactly sure the gap between Ocon and Hamilton and Magnussen, in that maybe it ends up that, Magnussen and Hamilton both get above Ocon if there was a 10-second penalty. Bit of a strange one. But yeah, definitely one to keep your eyes on. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.